A place not often or always written of or discussed in media and literature classrooms and creative writing workshops, the Midwest of the United States is as diverse and interesting as any other place in the country and the world. Today's readings, creative nonfiction, flash fiction, memoir, and poetry offer a few understandings of the diversity of lives in this region of the country. Far from being just Trump supporters, Midwesterners are as strange and normal, boring and exciting, and violent and loving as any other group of people. Today's readings will demonstrate this necessary correction to contemporary stereotypes and the erasure of Midwestern realities. Teri Fuller-Rouse is a Midwestern flatlander and professor of English at a community college in Northern Illinois. She writes lots, including essays, memoir, short stories, and flash nonfiction. Her work has appeared in Stoneboat Literary Magazine, Tiferet Journal, Essay, a Journal of Nonfiction Studies, Watershed Review, Lunch Ticket, and elsewhere. She lives with her husband and 3 children where the western suburbs of Chicago meet the cornfields. Today, Teri will read Me, a Midwestern Farm Girl and a Gun, which was published in Stoneboat Literary Journal. Jacqueline Wilson, a native of Southeast Iowa, is a 35-year veteran of teaching writing and American literature. Her areas of specialization are developmental writing, the American short story, and writing to heal. For 5 years, Jacqueline served as co-advisor of SITREP, Veteran Perspectives on Combat and Peace, a magazine for veterans and service members from Western Illinois University and West Central Illinois. Her critical and creative publications have appeared in Gravel, Short Story Criticism, Eureka Studies in Teaching Short Fiction, the Edith Wharton Review, and Memorial Boxes and Guarded Interiors, Edith Wharton and Material Culture. She is currently retired from full-time teaching, but continues as an adjunct for Western Illinois University. Jacqueline enjoys spending time with her teenage daughter and playing and singing folk music. Today, she will read Shot Taken, Poems and Flash Fiction. Billy Clem teaches composition, multicultural literatures, and women's and gender studies outside Chicago. His critical work has appeared in Melis, the Journal of the Society for the Study of Multi-Ethnic Literature of the US, and Encyclopedia of Contemporary LGBTQ Literature of the United States. His poems have appeared in print, in Great River Review and Moon City Review, and online at Vox Populi and What Rough Beast. Teri.
My turn.
Yes, please.
Okay. Me, a Midwestern farm girl and a gun. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. Thud. It came from downstairs. Then silence. I closed my eyes and continued. Guard me through the starry night. Wake me up mornings. Thud. Another one. Just the wind, I told myself, lying corpse in a coffin still. That night, Dad combined late. After Grandma fed us some supper, something she did ever since Mama died, I, already in 4th grade, stayed home until Daddy and my older brother, Rodney, got done in the fields. I didn't finish my prayers. There were more sounds from the kitchen. I got out of bed and crawled on my knees to the bedroom door. I looked around the corner and down the stairs. I couldn't see to the bottom of the staircase, so I crawled closer to get a better view. I could see part of the dining room table, but nothing else. There was no more noise, but I felt I wasn't alone. Quietly as I could, I crawled straight into Daddy's room, right across from mine. It was dark. I stood up straight onto my tiptoes and opened Daddy's top drawer. Please don't make a sound, Teri. I begged myself silently. Just be a good girl and do what Grandpa told you to do. The wooden drawer screeched as it scraped along the dresser's guides. Trying not to give myself away, I wiggled it open one tiny bit at a time, attempting to minimize its cry. As soon as I had enough room to put my hand in the drawer, I took out the gun and a box of bullets. I dropped back down to the floor and crawled towards the darkest corner, not wanting the tattletale old farmhouse floor to give me away. Then I waited. Time you learned how to shoot, Daddy said earlier that year. His words were a command, not an option. I couldn't tell him I didn't want to. He taught me on his revolver. the one he kept in the top drawer of his bedroom dresser. It was a Smith & Wesson with a long, cold metal barrel and a smooth, dark wooden handle. Daddy stood up and fired into the square piece of plywood he cut and spray painted with a bullseye target. On his third shot, he hit a bullseye. Bang, bang, bang. Daddy set the gun down on the ground. The chamber was only half full. I counted shots just like the boys did when watching TV. Daddy lit a congratulatory cigarette and stared at the holes he made. Your turn, sweetheart, he said. Daddy put the gun in my hand. I knew I had to follow his directions, so I held the gun, even though my insides felt allergic. My elbows buckled a bit under its weight, and then Daddy wrapped his body around mine, his hands steadying mine, so close to me. Learning to shoot, I thought, was much better than shooting itself. Nervous, I pulled back the trigger. It wasn't the bang I was afraid of, but how the bullet would scar the target made of wood, once a tree, if I managed to hit it at all. Then the gun fired and Daddy studied my body from the kickback. I didn't hit it. Keep your hands steady, Daddy said. Keep your eye on the target after you shoot. I didn't want to let Daddy down. As his body, hands, fingers disentangled themselves from mine, I looked down, sadness pulling the gun in my face towards the ground. I didn't want to shoot anymore, but most of all, I didn't want him to let me go. I raised the gun on my own. I had 2 bullets left. I narrowed my eyes on the target, gripped the revolver hard with my little sweaty hands, and prepared for the kickback. I took in one big breath and let it out as I pulled back the trigger. Bang! My body shot back from the force of the blast, but I didn't fall. This time I hit the bottom right-hand corner of the target. Daddy smiled proudly. He said I'd done good. Earlier that year, Daddy took me and Rodney to a gun shop a couple of small towns away from ours. Show me that one over there, Daddy said to the man behind the counter. The gun shop's walls were lined with guns, some small, some big, a shrine of them, a metallic temple. The man behind the counter, who hadn't shaved in days and wore pants 2 sizes too big, handed Daddy the gun. Ruger Mini 14 tactical rifle, the man said. Daddy aimed it away from us and towards something anonymous. Blank space on the wall. There was a black scope on top of the matching smooth metal black rifle, and he lined up his eye with the scope. Daddy put his finger on the trigger and pretended to pull it back. Bang, he said, laughed while faking a small kickback from the imaginary blast. Perfect and reliable, the man said. Been around for years. What kind of magazine you got for this one? Daddy asked. Without talking, the scraggly man bent down below the counter where I couldn't see him, and he popped back up with a curved black metal box. Here's your magazine, the man said. She's empty, right? Sure is. Take a look for yourself. Daddy examined the magazine with his working man's hands, and then he slid it up and into the bottom of the smooth black metal gun. As if holding a holy Bible, Daddy rested the gun on his open palms. The man and Daddy said a heap of words. Muzzle, sound suppressor, front sight, aperture, scope ring cut, optics. Daddy and the man spoke in a language I didn't understand. The thing was, Daddy wasn't just a consumer of guns. He was a connoisseur. Guns were all over our house. In Daddy's truck, his office, many of the outbuildings on the farm. My brothers, 12 and 16, had guns too, which they kept in their room. We didn't have safes for them, and my brothers stored theirs in their bedroom closets and under their beds. Rodney said he slept with a pistol under his pillow, but I hoped he was lying. Round the farm, men had guns. It was the same on neighboring farms and at my friends' houses in town. It was the same on TV. Male detectives like Magnum PI had guns. Bounty hunters like Colt Seavers, former secret agents like Robert McCall. Men used guns to protect women, The women didn't have guns. I never saw my grandmother with a gun, and my mama's sister, Aunt Barb, whom I saw on occasion. And Mama said she hated guns and refused to shoot them when Daddy tried to teach her. It wasn't like that for me, though. I was one of the boys when it came to Daddy. You got to protect yourself, Grandpa said after my first shooting lesson. Grandpa and I sat at the kitchen table having breakfast. Most weekends I stayed there at his house. It was just the two of us. Grandma was at the grocery. Sometimes it comes down to you and the other guy, and you want to shoot him before he shoots you, Grandpa said. Grandpa had been in the war. He had killed people. 1940 to 44, European theater, 83rd Division. Grandpa landed on Normandy and his troop liberated a small concentration camp, a sub-camp of Buchenwald called Langenstein. He said he'd never forget the dead, the piles, the piles. Grandma said that after Grandpa came back from the war, he wasn't right. Shell shock, Grandma said. Family and other people in town called Grandpa a war hero. But he didn't talk much about it, except with me. Say someone breaks in when you're home alone, Grandpa continued. I wanted him to stop, but his words were inescapable and kept coming, bullets of sounds that pierced the bullseye of my mind. You can't rely on 911 and what they tell you in school. Heck, it would take the county Mounties at least 15 minutes or more to get to the farm. And by then you'd be dead, sweetie. I nodded. I liked when he called me sweetie. You got to get your daddy's gun. Find a dark place and wait. You wait for him. When he's close, you make him out. Grandpa leaned back in his chair with satisfaction and said, you can see him, but he can't see you. I nodded again, this time focusing on the beauty of his blue, boyish eyes peeking out from under his sagging eyelids. And then, he said, pausing for an answer. I panicked. What do I say to stay as sweetie? I thought to myself. I responded with embarrassed silence. Shoot him, he answered for me. A gun is nothing to play with, Daddy told me after he taught me how to shoot. You don't go playing with it or show it to anyone. I told him I wouldn't, but I did. After all, Rodney did all the time. Amber, one of my friends from town, came to play one day later, that summer vacation. Like most town kids, she asked a lot of questions. She wanted to see the tractors, the motorcycles, the four-wheeler, the silo, the cats in the barn, and the outhouse that no one used anymore, that sat by a flock of rhubarb Grandma made pies from every autumn. I showed it all to them. They always wanted to ride my motorcycle, my Honda 50. Actually, they wanted to try. I let them. On the farm, we didn't ask permission for much, so I said yes when they asked. Amber liked adventures. She was the youngest of 3 daughters, and her parents owned the boat shop in town. Her father started off small and then later became Illinois' largest Ranger boat dealer. Amber's parents worked a lot and were hardly ever home. She had long curly hair that she styled and curled with products I didn't even know the stores sold. She had hairspray that shot out from a can and wore fishnet hair ties just like Madonna. I wanted to be just like her. I could show you Daddy's gun, I said. She looked eager, excited. Yes, she said with certainty. I knew I wasn't supposed to, but I wanted Amber to like me. We climbed the steep farmhouse stairs and turned right instead of left. Amber had never seen or been in my daddy's room before. It wasn't fancy like her parents. They had a master suite with its own bathroom. It had a shower and a bathtub with 2 sinks. Sit down on the bed and I'll get it, I said after I shut the door. Usually Amber gave the orders, but this time I did, and she sat. I like telling the queen bee what to do. I pulled open the top drawer of Daddy's dresser. Under the t-shirts, I felt the gun. I stood on my tiptoes and looked over the drawer's top edge. I carefully moved the white pressed t-shirts to the top drawer, to the top of the dresser, not wanting anyone to know I'd been messing with the gun. I left the bullets in the drawer. When I looked back at Amber, she smiled. I liked to make her smile. Most of the girls in my class did too. "Give it to me," she said. And just like that, she was back in charge. I handed it to her. She put both of her elegant hands with long, slender fingers on the handle. She lifted the gun, pointed it at the western window, and giggled. "What do I do now?" "Nothing right now," I said, shrugging my shoulders. "If you were actually shooting it, you'd pull back the trigger." I hadn't checked the chamber to see if it was empty, but I didn't want to interrupt her. I wanted her to have what she wanted. She gracefully used her right thumb to pull back the hammer and quickly pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing fired, and I exhaled. "Where are the bullets?" she demanded. "They're in here," I said, and I pointed to the top dresser drawer. "Let's put them in," she said. "I'm not sure. Oh, come on. We have to see how it works, right?" I did as she said and got out the box of bullets. I walked back to the bed where she sat, took the gun, and opened the chamber. I was right. No bullets. Amber watched as I filled the chamber with 6 bullets. "Close it," she said. I did, and for that she smiled extra pretty. She grabbed the gun from my hands, lifted it with both of hers, and aimed it again at the window. She put her thumb on the hammer. I panicked. I didn't know what to do, how to stop this disaster. "We should put it away now," I finally said. "We just got it out," she snapped. "I know, but we shouldn't be doing this," I said, each word dripping with apology. I was afraid she'd be upset with me, and I didn't want her smile to go away. Amber rolled her eyes. "Fine," she said, and she handed me the gun. Thud. Another one. Louder this time. Maybe downstairs. Maybe the stairs. I opened the chamber, dropped in the bullets just like Daddy showed me. Click. The chamber was locked and loaded. I nuzzled my back against the 2 points where the northwestern walls of Daddy's room met and held the gun in both hands, my arms wrapped around my knees. There was a creak. In my mind, I thought, was that the stairs? Then what was it that Grandpa told me to do? The gun felt heavier than it had when Daddy taught me to shoot, and I couldn't stop it from trembling. I didn't want to shoot anyone, but Grandpa said calling 911 would do no good. His sweetheart would do what he said. His sweetheart would get Daddy's gun and wait in the dark. Someone was getting closer. I opened my eyes wider, hoping to make something out. "See him before he sees you," I remembered Grandpa saying. I thought I heard a shuffle of feet on the carpet, but the noise moved away from Daddy's room, not into it. I couldn't see anyone. Then silence. Still, I waited. I tried to keep my eyes open, but eventually they closed and I fell asleep with a loaded gun in my hand, my weary hand that no longer shook. The next thing I knew, I heard the front door open. Daddy and Rodney are back from the fields, I thought. I heard Daddy cough, his lungs aggravated from the chaff in the fields and the 2 packs of Marlboros he smoked each day. I slid up the wall quietly. I prayed Daddy and Rodney would use the bathrooms before coming upstairs. And when I heard a bathroom door close, I walked over to the still open dresser drawer. I put the gun, still loaded, under the t-shirts. I hope Daddy wouldn't notice his messy shirts or the loaded gun in the morning. I just have to put everything back in order in the morning after Daddy left. I closed the squeaky drawer, went back to my room, and got under the covers. I heard footsteps on the stairs, but my booming, thumping heart silenced all sounds until I passed out from a whirling dervish of exhaustion. In the morning, something poked my face. First my cheek, then my forehead, finally my left ear canal. Whatever it was wiggled around in there. I opened my eyes. It was my brother, Rodney. He was on his knees next to my bed, and when he saw my terrified, confused face, he fell onto his back, convulsing with his obnoxious belly-grabbing laugh. Gotcha, he yelled. I tried to make sense of where I was, where he was, why he was there. What are you doing, Rodney? He finished laughing and sat up on his knees. What am I doing? I should ask you the questions. Where were you last night? You certainly weren't in bed. What are you talking about? I responded too quickly, too defensively. I finished before Dad, so I got the idea to scare you. When you weren't in your room, I got under your bed and waited about 10 minutes for you to come back, but you didn't. I decided to shut my mouth, not say another word, and wait him out. When he realized he wasn't getting anywhere, he got up. Whatever, he said. He left my room and went downstairs. My body, still in bed, shook just a little at first and then a lot. I felt hot, sitting on the surface of the sun hot. I couldn't breathe. I got up, shut the door, and gasped at air that wasn't there. I put my back to the door and slid down, my tailbone crashing into the floor. I leaned forward onto my knees and cried, letting the carpet soak up my tears, tears of realization that I was becoming just like my grandpa, who killed people in the war, like Daddy, who usually had a gun on him except at church, and Rodney, who shot at pretty birds from his second floor bedroom window for target practice. I felt I could vomit up all the things put in my head that I didn't even want. And then I remembered I needed to unload Daddy's gun and tidy up the drawer before anyone found out.
Thank you, Teri. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Jackie.
Okay, I'm going to start here with a poem. Several years ago, I took a community writing class, and the assignment was to write about a photograph. So this poem is a response to that assignment. It's called Shot Taken. In a faded Kodacolor, I am going on 3, wearing those pink pajamas with rubber-bottomed feet that keep little girls warm and safe. My brother is a baby in blue and white. Between us, pressed against our knees, is a Canada goose my dad shot out of the sky that morning before we were out of bed. Someone, my mom maybe, has laid it out on a sheet of discarded newspaper to protect the white linoleum of our kitchen floor. But the gooseneck crosses over the line of the newspaper square, crooked like a gun barrel that's been twisted by some angry man. I was born 7 months and 3 days before. My brother 10 months and 3 days after President Kennedy was shot in Dallas. I've seen that last freeze frame when his hand soars in the open air like a bird on the wing, and the motorcade rifles forward. Going on 3, the Canada geese I know are like that ghost in the picture. Still forms the color of lead that can reach the height of a small child. They carry the smell of my dad's camouflage jacket, a smell of burnt feathers that taste like tinfoil bitten by a cavity in the back of your mouth. Once plucked, the bumps on their bruised skin leak pink drops. I've seen that picture snapped on the plane back from Dallas. Lyndon Johnson holds up his right hand to face a man reading from a black book. Jackie Kennedy stands on the outside looking down. She's still wearing that pink suit and matching pillbox hat, now covered with blood and brains. Outside the frame, someone, my dad probably, has aimed the camera at me and told me to pet the goose. I smile up at him and bury my small hand in the soft feathers. This next poem was written on the strange occasion of going with my dad and stepmother to pick out a coffin for my grandmother who had just died. It's called Separation. The undertaker with the sunken cheek points to his warehouse and beckons. Inside, rows of coffins point against each other like factory steel. We point ourselves down the rows, pressing our palms against cool coppers, slates, and cobalts, shiny as gun barrels. We finger floating ruffles of perfidious peach, cruel baby blues, and vicious pinks. We pause at one lone oak and touch the wood, our fingertips hunting, tracing a pattern in the grain. A strong brown oak leaf embroidered on the inside of the lid will float over Grandma's head until it crumbles. When the guests file by, they will remark the beautiful oak leaf. I will gaze at my grandma's hands, folded and white like flaccid stems. This next one is called On Pork Chop Hill. My grandpa, who was born in 1903, was a farmer in southeast Iowa. And he had a hill on his land where he raised hogs. And a friend of his called it Pork Chop Hill. Later on, they put a mobile home up there, and that's where they lived after they retired from the farm. So this poem was written about a time that I was there with my grandfather after my grandma had died. On Pork Chop Hill, east of Morning Sun, Iowa. I remember one October night in '79. A cold wind is shrieking at the metal seams of the trailer, but never mind. Grandpa Cy has the furnace jacked up to 85, and he and I are staying up late for Carson. I curl up in the chair recovered in '68, my finger retracing the swirl pattern in green upholstery. I wonder if the cloth is still brown underneath. Sediment of a ripening season at the old home place. Those falls, I would lean on small elbows, watching Grandma peel apples for pie, wondering how she could turn the knife around and around to make one unbroken cord. Grandpa and I crunch on cheese curls, chuckle, and call ourselves the Night Owls, bragging loudly that we're the only ones who will wait up for Carson. We strain our ears for every joke. Never mind that Carson blats noise against the hollow walls of the trailer and ourselves, left alone together under the arc of a starry Iowa sky. Okay, this next poem is called Milkweed. That's partly based on a dream that I had, and also a friend who was ill at the time. When I learned you were sick, I closed my eyes and dreamed that I could pull milk from the earth or my body. I couldn't tell where, and spin its fine white drops into a centrifuge around you, a floating shield against what could take you, could bury you. Walking alone in the cemetery, reading the stone-etched names, I came alive for the first time in a decade. Noticed the beauty of grass, corn husk green, the bright silver threads of clouds winding through a sky of deep azure. I remembered the shape of my open hand and felt the wind's breath against my neck. I prayed for your recovery, but it wasn't a prayer. It was a summoning of the colors of a July afternoon and the heat that unrose from my unfolded body when I imagined you showing up at my door to take me without calling or being called. In time, I dreamed of milkweed, the pod's rough green arching its back against a field of bending grasses, exploding its white, frothy seeds to travel in the breeze. The beginning of an unforeseen journey that I called love. I could find no other name. When I saw the milky threads take to the air, I woke up again and knew you would be well. Okay, this next piece is a flash fiction called Don't Even Try to Understand. And the title is taken from a lyric from an Eagles song called Take It Easy. And I grew up listening to the Eagles. I love the Eagles, and I have this sort of, I would say, visceral kind of love for them and their music. And then when I got older and was introduced to feminist theory and understood text in a different way and listened to the Eagles lyrics, I thought, wow, these lyrics are very disturbing. And so I created this character. The character is not me, but I created this character to try to reconcile my contradictory feelings about this group and about sort of the power of music and where it comes from. So I'm going to show you just a quick video. I'm sorry, I'm not very adept at this, but okay, can you see this okay?
Yeah, we can see it
Okay.
just fine.
Okay. I'm just going to play a couple minutes of the Eagles playing Take It Easy. And if Glenn Fry is the lead singer.
Well, I'm running down a road trying to loosen my load. I got 7 women on my mind. 4 that wanna own me, 2 that wanna stone me, 1 so she's a friend of mine. Take it easy, take it easy, or let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up while you still can. Don't even try to understand. Just find a place and take your stand. Take it easy. Well, I'm standing to see. It's a girl, my lord, in a flatbed Ford. Slow it down and take a look at me. Well, come on, baby, don't say baby. I gotta know if your sweet love is gonna save me. We may lose and we may win, but we will never be here again. So open up, I'm climbing in. So take it easy. Come on, get loose. Hey, yeah.
Okay. So this is called Don't Even Try to Understand 2014. I wrote this a couple years before Glenn Fry died in 2016. Lounging in her ragged terry cloth bathrobe to watch a Netflix documentary called The History of the Eagles, she found herself weighing options. It was clearly a choice of either crying over lost youth or turning the dial back to 1977 and rolling around naked on a sticky shag carpet with Glenn Fry. She chose the latter. Except for the slightly schlocky plastic surgery that made his nose look a little soft and rubbery, the guy still had it. How had he survived the years so much better than she? While he still rocked it out in huge arenas to fan adulation, she spent her days as a women's studies professor at a small Middle West liberal arts college, facing self-actualized young feminists leaning forward in front row desks. This was her dream job. The young women were eager to raise their hands, couldn't wait to discuss the image of the rose-wet cave in Adrienne Rich's 21 love poems, or decry the evils of intersecting oppressions or patriarchal microaggressions. Who were they kidding? Late night bouts of insomnia sometimes drove her past the weekend after hours parties to catch dark glimpses of the same women in keg lines, their hands encircling red plastic cups, ditching self-conscious ideology to prowl for a hot man. Who was she kidding? She'd be doing the same if she could. Instead, here she sat, lonely, listening to Joe Walsh explain the history of the Eagles was like a, quote, finely crafted novel. In 1977, there was nobody more beautiful than Glenn Fry. The shaggy chestnut mane, the high cheekbones, the hawkish nose, the gorgeous audacity. She had been beautiful too, tripping tequila-soaked along the university town's wet sidewalk, gazing at her own shapely leg in the black net stockings and the patent fuck me pump. Arm in arm, her row of friends would stagger from bar to bar, singing, "Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up if you still can. Don't even try to understand. Just find a place to make your stand. Take it easy." If only. Back then, she'd refused lines of cocaine at wild college parties. It wasn't that she didn't want to break the law. In a way, she had wanted that more than anything else. But she suspected that coke wouldn't mix well with the heavy dread or that desperate compulsion to take note of everything until her body felt like it would collapse from the inside. Knowledge was supposed to make her feel safe, but it didn't. And now that she had reached middle age with no arrests, no speeding tickets even, all she could feel was envy when she'd read in the Mirror that the lining of Glenn's nose had to be rebuilt with Teflon because he destroyed it with too much snort. Instead, she became a 4.0 in English, an expert at unparceling fictional lives because she couldn't stand to live her own. It gave her a sense of limited satisfaction to point her razor-sharp intellect at beautiful lines like, I guess every form of refuge has its price. Glenn and Dawn shared author credit for that one, but only Henley, the intellectual, an English major like herself, could have put those words together on a page. Believing this to be so gave her the illusion that she was a word alchemist, but the beauty and mystery always came from outside, never from within. The history of the Eagles taught her that the band's sidemen gave out buttons for the after-concert parties, known as the third encore or spread eagle. No weirdos, Glenn said. The women's studies professor in her recognized and condemned the exploitation of the female body as sexual capital, but a yearning that came from some deeper place cast her back to 1977 to wish for a button in her hand. Don Henley, old velvet cuffs himself, might have fallen in love with her English major sensibility, whispering lines from Thoreau's Walden as he tied her hands to the bed. Anyway, Glenn would have been her first choice if she'd had one, which of course she wouldn't. The button was just a way through the door. Luckily, women's studies had saved her from the illusion of that being chosen was any different from being thrown away. At a recent concert, she'd listened to Glenn dedicate Lion Eyes to his ex-wife, otherwise known as Plaintiff. He was probably a Class A prick. In 1977, it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe it still didn't. Recently, she'd read a smart article in Salon about the Eagles, their sellout, grotesque lives of excess, money, drugs, and women, how they'd abandoned their early artistic integrity to create hit songs with catchy lines and fly around in a private jet while scolding the rest of the world about the urgent need to save the planet. Years of feminist study had led her to fantasize titles for academic papers like Best of My Love questioned the objectification of women in the songs of the Eagles. For starters, the daughter of the devil himself and an angel in white was an untenable subject position, a place no woman could occupy. What layers of patriarchal bullshit might be uncovered in an exegesis of, you're still the same old girl you used to be? And clearly when Glenn announced, so open up, I'm climbing in, he wasn't just talking about the flatbed Ford. Fuck the scholar mind that kept calling that a metaphor. She just wanted it to be an invitation for a good time. Arguing that the line constituted a demand might lead to a more provocative concept. Did the Eagles help to foster late 20th century rape culture? Surely a question like that in a title would secure her place at the MLA. But she didn't want to go. She would rather just put that old LP on the turntable, close her eyes, and drift back, picturing herself as one of the 7 women on his mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to read a few poems and hope that I keep to 20 minutes. I'm timing myself, but someone cut me off because I'll keep going. Please, thank you. My first poem is called Interstices, with an epigraph from Virginia Woolf to the Lighthouse, in which the narrator and Lily seem to have a moment of what I think we call free indirect discourse. To love makes one solitary, she thought. The crescent moon lies on its back tonight, looks lazy for the first time ever. Such comfort ought to be an affront, really. A student Snapchatting, a single piece of clean toilet paper after great pain, a sleeping security guard on a clear, windless night. But no, it's an infant's legs held up while her aunt slips on another dry diaper, a quick check for freshness, some fast love before returning to the adults. A still, well-worn hammock, not waiting for the burden of someone's belly, mind, or ass. Just the clean palm of the ill man finally on white sheets, not fighting yesterday, stalking tomorrow's ammo, cupping only light, not a sickle or a reflection, not even bared teeth, ready, just resting, one leg over the other, head held firm, worn knuckles interlaced, preparing for its own fullness, for all the eggs to come for you. Instruction. Kneeling, like the sick altar boy I was, I always fainted before the homily, a long story of moral obligation, a meaning for placement both righteous and pure, a priest's tale of rectitude. I let our best gym teacher, Coach Johns, young, short, handsome, a favorite, new to the junior high and eager to train us for exercises of any kind, from warming up to lifting to cooling down, bore into my 12-year-old brain with his fiery green eyes and press my shoulders, thin, bony, pliant, like a guide, a prophet, a Virgil, to the freezing locker room shower, smeared and streaked by God knows what, down below his gray whistle and little belly for his red bike shorts. You know the kind, right? Mid-80s wide straight line pockets that set up the tight tailored thighs and those two evenly spaced top buttons of chipped plastic that offered what my teeth, braced, shifting, excited, would reveal as a tangible manhood to worship, not one nailed and starving in public, but a fullness, heavy and secret and decorated, with blonde hair and pulsing between the blunt ionic columns of his white legs that straddled a drain where after a few minutes, or a long time, I'd take a mouthful of salt, slimy as dead eel, the communion I'd return for every day after school, a good supplicant to save myself and the world. I like formal poems, although I don't write them well. I try. And one of those is a triolet, and I took some notes about this, so I hope I'm correct. A triolet is an 8-line poem with repeating lines and a strict rhyme scheme. Lines 1 and 2 repeat as the final lines, 7 and 8, and line 1 repeats as line 4. In addition, it has a very strict rhyme scheme of simply AB, or AB, A sub 1, A sub 1, B sub 1, A, and B. And I have 2 triolets that I hope make some sense and are not too sing-songy or rhymey, but you can tell me. This one is called muscle bro, a term I've heard among men who work out, particularly gay men who are trying for heterosexuality or something, I'm not sure. Muscle bro. Hit the gym and lift and transform to muscle, bro. Sweat and grunt and flex and swell into a man. Maximize yourself and pump and grow and show. Hit the gym and lift, transform to muscle. Bro, don't stay a pussy boy or walking dildo, a queer, a twink, a fat or femme, join our clan. Hit the gym and lift and become a muscle bro. Sweat and grunt and flex and swell into a man. The other triolet I have is called Recompense, and I've stolen and modified a line from the great formalist poet Marilyn Hecker. She has part of her cancer winter poems. When she had cancer, she has a line embedded in a long sequence of sonnets that reads, I woke up and the surgeon said you're cured. And I use this for my triolet called Recompense. When I wake up, the surgeon says you're cured. But I have grown accustomed to men's lies from all the lips I've kissed around the world. When I wake up, the surgeon says, you're cured, and looks and sounds as smooth as those I once adored, their whispered songs, fine hands, and reassuring eyes. When I wake up, the surgeon says, you're cured, but have I grown accustomed to men's lies? I've also tried to write guzzles. Guzzles are, I think, more and better known in English now than ever before. More than 20 years ago, the great poet Agha Shahid Ali, who died some years ago, of course, really cleaned it up for Anglophone or English language poets who just weren't getting it right, really, for decades and decades. And he taught everyone that this great poem comes from the Urdu and the Persian and the Arabic and can be made in English if done correctly in couplets following particular rules. And so I've written that the attempt to master the matla, or the first couplet, and to make the radif, the ending words, work with the kafiya, which are the repeating patterns that one hears before those ending words, is difficult and fun if always not done well in my hands. Finally, the Mokta is for and fun for egomaniacs like me or myself who like to insert our own names in poems. And if you've read ghazals, you know in the final couplet, the poet often inserts his, her, or their own name or something about his or her or their own name. The other thing about ghazals that are so wonderful and that I cannot master is that the couplets should be able to be anywhere in the poem and not very Western and closed off, as Ali said himself when he was alive, but mine never do that. They're always rather too well made and not well made simultaneously. The first ghazal is called At 18. You must submit, do your best to hate me. All you need to do tonight, hate me. The surround sound of this shitty little town prevents the silly notion you might date me. Like all the other gentlemen around, your suit and tie permit you to confiscate me. Your wedding band will leave its golden mark upon my puppy thighs as you eviscerate me. All sweaty palms and sloppy tongues require blood, so drink and hold your burning need to desecrate me. Don't worry, man, your civic standing is secure. After you, no one shall dare commemorate me. When your work is done, I, Billy, am no more. If you'll obey your God, you must incinerate me. Another ghazal I have steals the entire first couplet from a poem, from a story by Rick Bass called Swans. He's a story writer about whom I don't know very much, but I've read a number of his stories and I thought they were fine. This line I've stolen comes from the story Swans that actually has a character named Billy. Well, the Billy in this poem is certainly not the Billy in that story, but I read this line and I could not help but immediately want to write a ghazal. Whether that's successful is something else, of course. They saw me fall in and out of love 3 times, being rejected, abandoned all 3 times. The first guy, an aging, tanned Republican, claimed 3 years. I refashioned all 3 times. Red ties and tight khakis, mousse in my hair, I dressed the part for the homeland all 3 times. With grown kids and a wife, number 2 wanted a bit on the side. We hardened all 3 times. His utopia, short weekends in tents, stolen bliss in a woodland all 3 times. Bondage for the last one, ropes, whip, cuffs, blindfold, gag, harness, cage. I stayed fastened all 3 times. Paddle, plugs, collar, burns, scars, and more guys. I tired of men and left gangland all 3 times. Friends cast unnerving looks for each exchange. I stood unforlorn, just bludgeoned all 3 times. Hermit, recluse, monk, celibate, bachelor, freedom, Billy, not a husband, all 3 times. This poem is called The Swimming Pool. Daddy handed me a shovel and watched me work all day, every day, all summer in the red clay backyard, alone, digging a hole for what I later learned was our white trash swimming pool, above ground, self-dug, no ladder, so you could jump on in like the 3 neighbor boys did the night I, burnt thinner with the teens' tiny biceps, completed my hot and hated task. I stared a bit at their splashing, hollering, and dunking one another in new blue chlorine. They pissed, spit, and cursed in freely. Daddy wasn't angry at all. He bought the boys beer and peanuts and played Home Sweet Home and Welcome to the Jungle, and they all swam until dawn. Cantankerous and thick and fun, they were the sons that Daddy needed. I was, in their shadow, their father's Ganymede. I think the greatest contemporary American poet is Linda Pastan, P-A-S-T-A-N. Unfortunately, not everyone reads her, so all of you tonight will read poems by Linda Pastan. I insist upon it. She's really excellent. No one does what she does with the short line, metaphor, simile, image, and myth. She's about 90 years old, and she's really fantastic. And I read a poem of hers in the Paris Review some years ago called Last Rites, which was published in her most recent collection called Insomnia. And I immediately sat down and wrote this poem after reading that poem 3 times, which never happens. It just happened. And her poem is better, so go read Last Rites. My poem is what it is, of course. It's called At 40. He's given up the hunt, the cruise, the search and rescue for a prince, and the highs that trick the brain, widen the eyes, and beat the heart, if by chance hands or knees or lips brush the craving touch vital as air and water to frogs, contemporaries, ancestors, who learn to leave the lake crowded with larvae, always hatching the past brighter in unfoldings of light and sudden swirls to firm ground inland, where a quiet croaking holds no call for one who, with clear lungs, leaps now into the dark and burrows in cold loam. After Donald Trump was, is the word elected? I don't think it is, made president in 2016, I suppose, like many people, was disturbed. And I had been reading Anne Carson and her prose poems for some time around that time. And then this poem came to me about 2 or 3 days after the election, which was 8 November 2016. So I've titled mine 9 November 2016, the day that Hillary Clinton, I forget what the word is, conceded the election. 9 November 2016. This morning, no sun shines. I'm sorry, this morning, the sun shines bright as fool's gold. No warmth, no vitamin D to overdose on. My body, a glass house of thin pains and in need. So I am recalibrating to America, Midwest, eating some more orange rust, praying to a new sort of God. Walmart will save me, make my life great again. I ask my favorite surgeon to wire my jaw shut. He agrees, and you will find my bones with those of the dinosaurs who once roamed a cleaner earth dumbly in search of some green. You'll remember, right? I'm just going to read, I think, 2 more poems. One is entirely too sentimental and not finished. My mother died 3 years ago. Her birthday would be in 2 days from now. She would be 72. She suffered cruelly for about 10 years. And after she died, I was given a number of pictures of her from before she was ill. And I had forgotten what she looked like, how beautiful she was, how interesting she was, because for 10 years, I tried caring for her as I could, and she just deteriorated physically in every way. And so this image I have of her in my head, I've tried to make into a poem that I really don't think is successful, but I'm trying to make it work. It is called Backyard Bird Bath. Under budding apple trees and bushes greening for a trim, this rest stop, this palm open, grimy and slick as an old serving plate, beside the blue-cloaked statue of the Virgin and full of last night's rain that Mama hauls in her tin pail every morning to learn again her limps back and forth for these frequent flyers who drink or bathe and trill better than opera stars, who might fight or meet a mate in their pause here. This refueling station filled every indigo morning before the red, brown, and blue guests take the air again and Mama returns to her chair and waits. And then I'll end with the only poem I've ever written that I somewhat like. I'm afraid to say that out loud for fear it's a terrible poem, but I kind of like it, although it's not a masterpiece, to be sure. And it's called Spring in White. And the last line I've somewhat stolen from a very famous American story writer, and I won't tell you who it is. You'll have to figure it out, which I know is cruel and stupid, but maybe you'll know when I read it. It's probably obvious. Spring in White. It's April, and the robins have returned, and shit streaks long and white as pulled, uncolored taffy. They christen budding lawns, walkways, and streets, clear now for the ice cream man who anticipates heat with his gauzed wrists and cowbell. Kids on the block escape their winter nests and find a first taste of chance before they watch their sweet fat clouds tumble after a few licks and grins to the indifferent marching ants. and the block's crazy lady, boarded up all winter with her bright, uncaged birds, singing, cawing, screaming like a pride parade in rooms undusted and stacked with newspapers and letters from 3 wars ago, comes out in her straw hat, 80s shades, Birkenstocks, and loose cream-colored socks, the season's first linens. She dances clean through the stains and spills and stares to the fields of lilac and viburnum, now cleaning the air at last, her long silk scarf trailing her like a wedding veil, waving us goodbye. Thank you.
Actually, I guess I had my mic on. You you could actually do an encore, Billy. You got about 3 minutes to get to your 20.
Oh, do we really want to hear any more from me?
Hey, get your money's worth. You said 20 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I have an abecedarian here, a poem that I thought, a form I thought I invented when I was in junior high school, a poem that begins with a letter of the alphabet, and it can be 26 words or it can be a longer poem. Each line begins with a letter of the alphabet. I was sure I had made that up when I was a child. When I got to college and learned that these poems existed, I was very disappointed for a long time. But a summer or so ago, I wrote an abecedarian as an assignment, and it's called Singing. Again, this isn't suitable for boys. Baseball, yes, and even soccer, just not choir with its matching robes and alien devotion to an old man's slick baton, engorged and bright for all the boys to see, fags who opened their lips in unison, gay as cardinals at the Eastertide, those homos on display, doing what they and I'm only 12 years old, I'm only 12, joy and not, alas, in secret anymore, kicking decency right to the curb so they can lick their lips, inhale, and all together make a joyful noise unto the Lord, not as he would want or sanction such offenses in his name by those who practice first alone and later in public, queening, preening, we cannot tolerate, so resist abduction into glee club's thrall, sinful sissies strutting innocence, tenor, baritone, and bass alike, ubiquitous in harmony, above virile beasts that only wax and wane like time itself, that leveler, that xenophile in tune with those like you loving cherubs of another land, zones where petunias always bloom.
Thank you very much. Billy, it's still your panel, but so if you want to open it up, we can chat.
Yes, thank you. I would love for people who have questions. I've taken notes and have some questions, but I'd much rather let other people ask questions if they will. If others have questions or comments, that would be wonderful. If not, I can begin by saying that I was struck and somehow did not catch this when we first put this together, that Teri and your writing and Jackie, and I think 2 of your poems, there are fathers with guns and daughters who need to negotiate physically and intellectually and emotionally what those guns can mean in their lives. I don't think this is particular to the Middle West. I think it's really everywhere because patriarchy is everywhere. But I was struck by that connection that I did not make before and what that might mean. Do you want to say more about guns in your lives and fathers in your lives and their guns and what that might mean? I hope that question isn't too silly.
Go ahead, Teri.
I'm so sorry. What was that?
Teri, could you hear the question or the comment I made?
No, I didn't. I could hear your question. Thank you. What was that you said, Jackie?
Oh, I just said go ahead, Teri.
Oh, okay. Well, for me, guns and violence were very much a medium for love in my home, and they were a way to connect to others So I was very much trained to be violent, and in so doing, I did receive the validation that I was looking for from the people that I loved.
Thank you. Thank you. Jackie?
Yeah, I noticed the same thing. I was sitting and listening to Teri's, and I was having almost like a visceral response because of my own family gun issues. And then when I got to my line about the gun, I didn't realize that was there either, as you said, Billy. But yeah, guns were very prevalent in my growing up, and dead animals and dead birds. And one of my aunts observed once, and this spoke for me, was that she, as a woman, identified with the dead animal. And I did too, very much so, growing up.
Yeah. Thank you. Those are very excellent and troubling answers, troubling in the sense of what it means in the patriarchy and capitalism and gun culture that seems to increase or grow greater all the time, unfortunately, I think. I'm also struck, and Jackie, in your flash fiction, in your shorter story, you explicitly mentioned feminist theory. And so I wanted to ask both of you if feminism or feminist theory is important to you personally, and then while you are writing. And I don't want to say feminism as a consciousness, as a conscious part of your writing, but does it come into your writing in some way?
It's definitely important to me. When I went to graduate school and took many or several feminist theory classes, the theory was very relevant to my personal life. And I ended up writing an essay that brought feminist theory to my grandmother's life. And I really did sort of remake my understanding of the world through feminist theory, and changed a lot as a person as a result of that.
Thank you, Jackie. I like Jackie. I was sort of reborn with feminist theory, and that's what I guess disturbs me most about my upbringing is how masculine I was in seeking validation and love, and it brings almost a sense of shame with it, knowing now what I did not know then. And so I think for me, reading texts like Feminism is for Everybody and so forth, just those staple books, I think I had it wrong for so many years, and I was a product of my environment and culture. But I suspected all along that that something was amiss, of course, although I couldn't articulate it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to open it up to others. Ian, Matthew, Larkin, Brandon, I think you are A&S Dean's office, but I'm not sure who that is. Maybe you want to have questions or comments?
Billy, I had a question for you. I enjoyed and was impressed with the range of poems that you read, and the themes that come through made me want to ask you to talk a little bit more about how art and spirituality connect for you. Could you talk a little bit about that for you?
Thank you. I can try. I think that writing is, I always get the word wrong, if it's unconscious or subconscious, that the best writing comes in a way that one cannot describe, I think. And thinking of the feminist theory question I asked and the question that you just asked, I think that when I'm writing, I was asked this question last summer in a workshop by a brilliant poet. He told us to summarize just in a few sentences what writing is, what we try to do. And I think I try to explore imagination's realities and explore reality's imaginations. And I think that deep within my mind and body is a spirituality and a consciousness that is always already connected to what I feel, meaning what the scholar Robert Jensen has said, that I think through my body. I think many feminist scholars have said that, of course. And as for spirituality specifically, I was raised a Roman Catholic and I converted to being an Episcopalian. And while I am somewhat connected to those, I think that spirituality is probably, religion, I should say, is probably deep within my consciousness, whether I like that or not, and comes out. And as for spirituality, I think it's something I have to work toward. I think it does come through in some of those poems. I hadn't thought of that until you asked, so thank you. But I think if it comes out and how it's connected to other parts of writing, I can't speak well of it only other than to say that it is automatic or unconscious and just happens without my knowing it. So for example, in the Abecedarian, make a joyful noise unto the Lord is just a line I know from growing up and really just happened to work in what I would, automatic is not right, but in the writing of that Abecedarian. Does that somewhat answer the question that you've asked?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, or I can ask a follow-up.
I have a question if I can jump in and if my mic is working. I'm wondering on the topic of the Midwest and what the Midwest means to the three of you. You know, Billy, when you introduced the panel and the reading, you talked about how the Midwest is just as weird and strange, diverse, interesting, boring, you know, as anywhere else. I'm wondering, and I'm asking this because I sometimes feel this personally, if you have to sort of consciously push away the sort of no, I don't want to say cliches, I guess, of what the Midwest is, right? That picture of the Midwest. When somebody says Midwest, you know, my mind automatically goes to Iowa, Illinois, the flatlands, the agriculture, and all of that. When I know consciously that it's more than that, that it's also Chicago and Detroit and the UP, right, and which is about as far from, you know, Indiana as you can get in, you know, aesthetically. I've written about suburbia and trying to push against the stereotype of what the suburbs are, because it never really matched up to my upbringing in the suburbs. But I because I wrote about it, I am very conscious of it. So when somebody says suburbia, I'm always like, you know, careful there. It's not just what you think. It is that, but it's more. But sorry, my dog is barking. But I haven't written about the Midwest, though I've written about the Midwest. I haven't written about it directly in that way. And so I still find myself working with a lot of blind spots and sort of automatic assumptions that I have to consciously work against. I'm rambling, but I'm wondering if anybody has similar experiences, or what is it that comes to mind when you think of the Midwest, or what should we think of when we think of the Midwest?
Jackie and Teri, please go ahead.
Teri.
I was going to give it back to you, Jackie. So the question is, what should we think about?
I guess so. I'm not sure if I think there was a question there somewhere.
I think so too. Well, I think that Billy really nailed it when he said that, it's just really a cobbling together of so many different aspects that makes us similar yet dissimilar from peoples in the US or around the globe. For me personally, I have a very narrow experience of the Midwest. So I don't explore necessarily the diversity of the Midwest, which I think would be interesting, especially now that I live in a suburb that is on the outskirts of farmland. So I'm not sure what to do with that. And I'm not sure how we integrate stories of the UP and of urban centers. I think we look for writers who certainly speak to these issues and seek them out to see the different perspectives. I certainly don't write about them, but maybe I should.
Well, I guess I'm from Iowa, rural Iowa, and if you tell someone you're from rural Iowa, they say, "Don't you have a lot of corn there?" Like that's the typical response. Um, my family is a, pretty ordinary family, but there's a lot of interesting, I would guess, almost kind of gothic, strange dimensions to my Midwest family. And like my great aunt had electroshock therapy, and my uncle went to war, and the internal stories to me are so rich and interesting, and oftentimes they're based in secrecy, because I think part of my Midwest ethic was that you don't talk about a lot of things. Many topics are taboo. So one of my great aunts was the product of a, quote, man from the carnival. I found this out as an adult, but it had been kept secret for decades. So there's all this drama like under the surface for me that I love to write about, that characterizes, I guess, the Midwest, because it's the people who live there, in my family at least.
I wish that I could say something intelligent about the Midwest. I was born in Chicago on the South Side in an all-white neighborhood that was really it's openly racist, really. My school was not desegregated until I was in the 3rd grade. And then my father's job forced us to move to southern Missouri near the Arkansas border. And my formative years were spent there. Then I moved to Illinois in the late 1990s and have lived really in the Middle West, in Chicago and in rural Illinois, for more than half my life, certainly, but I still think of myself as something of an upland southerner or a Missourian, although I'm not really crazy about Missouri, to be sure. The land is different, the people are different. The white people are probably the same, but people of color, I think, are different, coming out of different migration patterns and cultures in some way. So to write about the Midwest, I don't know what to do. I feared that as I was reading and didn't recognize this until then, talking about the red clay and the one poem, that's very much something I learned immediately upon moving to Missouri as a 9-year-old. My mother, who had grown up and lived in Chicago her entire life, my father was from southern Tennessee. So we had this, I guess, somewhat diverse household, and geographically at least. It was very difficult to plant a garden in southern Missouri that we needed to survive, because the dirt is not black dirt that it is in Illinois, that is so rich and really great for growing vegetables of all kinds. In Missouri, it's cattle farms and red clay, and it's really difficult to get things going. And we really had to pay a great deal of money to import black dirt from somewhere else to mix in the ground and make these things. But when I think of the Middle West and living here, since I have now more than 20 years, I still find, and I hope this won't be offensive, but the cornfields and the flatlands are, I don't want to say troublesome, but not home for me, because I grew up quite literally on the edge of a small town in Missouri, where across the street was a valley of nothing but trees and abandoned barns and animals, where I spent a great deal of my time, if not in the library. So about the Middle West, I'm afraid that I probably have inside me a number of the stereotypes about it, but living here and working here, it seems to me to be a place that is, as you know, Ian, your description of the UP and Indiana and Iowa seems to be true to me. It seems to me that Chicago, while certainly a city, is not New York or LA or San Francisco or Seattle, it seems to me very much a Midwestern city. Unlike St. Louis, which I think is considered a Midwestern city, but seems to me a Southern city, sort of like Baltimore or DC in that way. So I find myself going on and unable to say anything intelligent about the Midwest, other than I feel like someone who was born here but retransplanted and still is trying all the time to come to terms with it. And so trying to write about it, I don't know if it's always possible for me to do that directly or well at all.
You know, I'll follow up with a quick comment as we near the witching hour here at 3 o'clock. That first of all, this was a wonderful panel, and I'm really glad that we were able to put it together. And it brought back a lot of memories to me that are not hard to bring back up, because they're well formed, and that is that. From 1992 to 94, my wife at the time was in the creative writing program at Iowa State, and I was living in Ames, Iowa. So, so I can participate in this one as the Midwest thing too. But also, that's where I taught a lot at Des Moines Area Community College, DMAC. At the Ankeny campus, which was the main campus. And there's a way in which, I teach at the University of Louisville, and there's some degree of overlap. Community college is its own beast, and you can get kind of nostalgic. I can remember very clearly, and also it was my first experience really teaching, so those sort of stick, but I can remember stories that my students wrote. One in particular it's called like My Friend David. And this was a nurse who was taking, it was like a communication skills class. And the story, her friend David was a boy who was riding on the fender of his father's tractor and reached up to grab a walnut and fell, and the tractor rolled over him, and he was then like a vegetable. And she had this detail in the story about the nurse coming out hysterical that the black of the walnut shell couldn't come off of the boy's hand. It was like this Lady Macbeth moment. And we put together a stack of, and I believe it was called Friends, of the best pieces from this class, and some were resumes, and they didn't want to put My Friend David in it because, it was just, it was like a greeting card concept to them, you know what I mean? And you don't put, and I was like, this is one, I'll never forget this story ever, and it's got to go in. But to me, there's something those memories to me are very Ankeny, Iowa. They're very Midwestern. Those people are Midwestern, and Midwestern Community College, and there's something that I really value about having spent 2 years teaching those kinds of students, frankly. So, and this panel really made me, for obvious reasons, remember that those 2 years in my life. So So thank you.
Thank you, Matthew, for making this possible for us. I know that I think I must have sent you 10,000 emails. I apologize about that. You are free to delete them and forget me forever. Of course.
No. You got to come for the 50th, man.
You know what? I want to make a joke with you, if I may. I sent in this and also an academic paper, and it was never accepted or rejected. And I thought it must just be. I think it was because I'm not.
Yeah, we made a decision. So but I mean, again, you round up good people. And consider yourself deputized for the 50th to round them up in Midwestern style and bring them here. And we'll do this all in person, hopefully, God willing.
I would love that. This has been, I've been to this conference 3 times now since the late 90s. It was my very first conference ever as a master's student, which was terrifying with all of these real scholars doing real things. And there I was, 22 years old, a total idiot, not that I'm smarter now, giving about somebody about whom I knew nothing. And the people were very kind to me. Of course, when I came some 10 years later and talked about Toni Morrison and now today, every time it's always such a wonderful experience. I'm just sorry that we cannot be there in person. Learning from all of the wonderful panels, literary criticism, theory, and the creative writing that is happening. And I think it's a great thing, and I may be wrong, that the conference has expanded to creative writing. I think in years past that was not the case, that it was really academic criticism and theory.
You're right that that niche has grown quite a bit, and it is becoming, as Ian well knows, the meat and potato really of the conference, and particularly these sorts of panels that are, looking to stretch and blur the genres. So, and as conference director, I think you ride the horse that got you here and try to get even more out of it. So I think that's going to grow for us. And I do recommend, Tom wasn't, you can see in the chat, you did get chats like Amy Wright, who was the panel before you, has got a wonderful collection out that she edited from Saravan, wrote powerful, thank you all, I have to go teach. And Ian has written here, thanks for those excellent thoughts. And Tom Slay is reading at 3:30, and he sat in on Amy's panel, but and sends his regrets, but he wanted to get ready to read. But if you want to hear Tom, I encourage you to, to go to the Louisville.com and click on the virtual Tom Slay Zoom and come join us at 3:30. And that's the end of our virtual component anyway. So it sounds to me like our business here is concluded. So I did want to say also, I didn't say it to Jackie and to Teri, that I truly enjoyed, I really did. I enjoyed everybody's work here. I thought I'm not a fan of the Eagles, but I'm a fan of your piece, and I got it fully. And Teri, that was a great story in that its temporal shiftings were really expertly handled, I thought, and the suspense was perfect. And of course, it ended. I was really relieved, because nobody got killed at the end of that piece. Although one is left with dread that we've just got a dress rehearsal for something far worse. And as the son of a Korean War veteran and small business owner and motorcycle shop small business owner, my dad always had a bank bag, with the key in it and click and it pop up and had a zipper. And there was money in that bag, and there was a 38 special in that bag. Always, like he had to do that money drop, and he back then, it was tougher to get a license to carry a concealed weapon, and he had to carry a concealed weapon. And I knew how to shoot, and I still have my father's sidearm, I guess you would call it. And, so it was, I mean, I don't have to tell you that it was, I didn't doubt any of it, like it was all spot on. And so congratulations. It was really nicely done piece.